We have a rare look now inside a medical clinic on the front lines in Ukraine, facing the devastating aftermath of those controversial cluster bombs. Russia's been using them, and the U.S. now plans to send them to Ukraine's army as well. Charlie D'Agata saw the very real human effect these weapons can have, and he saw it up close at an undisclosed location in eastern Ukraine. And we do warn you, as we often do, this report contains disturbing images.
Sipping a coffee at this shell of a clinic near the front lines, there's no telling what the day will bring for Dr. Alexei and his skeleton staff. This is a stabilization clinic, the first stop for wounded soldiers and civilians with one primary mission. We stabilize, so if there are heart failures or blood losses, he says, we bring the patient back to life and we take them further down the evacuation line. So they survive long enough to reach better-equipped hospitals, the hours-long journey further away from the constant risk of Russian bombardment. There are explosions off in the distance, but then something much closer. There's a sudden urgency. Take someone with you and go check it out, Dr. Alexei orders. Secondary explosions ring out. Weary soldiers seem to know exactly what's happening. The first of the injured arrive. More soldiers, more gravely wounded. But then we watched as the civilians started coming, begging for help. Some unable to speak at all. About 20 minutes after we arrived, there's this huge explosion not more than 200 or 300 yards away, and ever since there's been this steady flow of wounded soldiers and civilians alike. We lost count of the number of people rushed through the doors, but it became clear this was an attack on a residential neighborhood. We have a cardiac arrest, shouts a medic. Heart stopped for 2 minutes. They're struggling to find room. Let's start compressions now. The overwhelmed clinic has quickly become a battlefield triage. In the chaos, life and death decisions between who may make it and who will not. This is the harsh reality of war. Shrapnel wounds, head injuries, chest injuries, limbs clamped with tourniquets to stop patients from bleeding to death. Wounds consistent with cluster bombs, Dr. Alexei tells us.
Because of your experience, can you be sure those injuries were from a cluster bomb?
Yes, they're used by the enemy a lot. It's not the first time and not the last.
We saw some of those horrific injuries. Is it fair to say that if they weren't treated here first, they might not have made it to the next hospital?
Yes, they wouldn't have made it. He says blood loss is enormous. In those injuries, the first thing is to put tourniquets on.
Did you lose some people today, too?
Yes, it's a war. He says people die. Despite the trauma, he says there's no time to be tired. He'll rest after the war.
Do you ever get angry?
For me, anger is like a motivating force, he says. I just point it in the right direction. For CBS Mornings, Charlie D'Agata in eastern Ukraine.
You hear these denials from Russia about how they don't target civilians. You see civilians pouring in right after explosions in the not-too-distant future. So we say disturbing images. We say that often. That really lived up to that.
It's hard to see people possibly dying right before your eyes.
Yeah, it's tough to watch, but necessary reminder of what is going on.
About what is happening.